In his Jump Festa 2024 interview, Eiichiro Oda said that a fight between this character and that character would happen this year in One Piece. Even though it would be completely unexpected, it's actually possible that the fight he's talking about is going to be between Shanks and his brother. Not only this, but Shanks' secret brother could genuinely be one of the most legendary figures in the entire One Piece story, and possibly someone even stronger than Shanks himself. Apologies in advance because this video is going to be all over the place. Also, if you are confused, there's another video on my channel that elaborates why the man who met the Gorosei back during the reverie cannot be Shanks and why it could be his twin brother. If you've already watched that or have already been convinced by someone else that this could be Shanks' twin, you should be good to go for this video. To get back to the topic, if we assume that the man who met the Gorosei is Shanks' brother, what would be his position in the One Piece world? He's clearly someone very important, as he's allowed to meet the Five Elders right in the middle of the reverie. The Five Elders also state that he came from very far away, meaning that he probably doesn't live in the Holy Land. It's actually possible that this figure is someone the story has been hinting at for years, and that he'll be a very important character in One Piece's endgame. In chapter 434, when Shanks meets Whitebeard, Whitebeard says that looking at Shanks' face makes the scar he got from someone else ache. If Shanks actually has a twin brother in the story, it would actually make a lot of sense that he's the character Whitebeard is talking about here. This would mean that Shanks' twin and Whitebeard have history, which is actually really interesting. This is because it might mean that Eiichiro Oda years ago talked about introducing Shanks' brother to the story. Oda said that in 2018 he would introduce a lurking legend of the One Piece world who was connected to Whitebeard and would in the future become the greatest enemy of the Straw Hat Pirates. To give you a timeline of events, 2018 in the manga was the end of the Whole Cake Island arc, the Reverie arc, and the start of the Wano arc. For the longest time, I was personally very confused by who this character was supposed to be. For example, 2018 saw the introduction of Imu, who will likely become a great enemy of the Straw Hats in the future. Yet Imu has no known connection to Whitebeard, meaning that he cannot be the character Oda was talking about. 2018 is also when the manga first brought up the Rocks Pirates. However, this also didn't fully fit Oda's message. While the Rocks Pirates were mentioned, Sebek himself wasn't, and it took until 2019 when he was genuinely introduced to the story. I personally haven't thought about this in a while, but it's possible that Oda might have been talking about Shanks' twin in this interview. The scene where the Gorosei talked to a man resembling Shanks happened in 2018, fitting the timeline of Oda's message. He would also fit the word choice of lurking, as Whitebeard possibly first brought him up all the way back in 2006. Naturally, this would also make him someone connected to Whitebeard, as someone who possibly scarred him in the past. This finally leaves us with the last part of Oda's message, which is that this character will be a great enemy of the Straw Hats in the future. This is where we'll go even a step further with the topic of this video, and also assume that Shanks' twin is not only the character Whitebeard spoke of, and the lurking legend Oda introduced in 2018, but also the enigmatic man marked by flames. For a brief recap, there's a mysterious figure in the One Piece world known only as the man marked by flames, who's said to be in possession of the 4th Road Poneglyph that used to be located on Fishman Island. While other characters have heard of this figure, they don't know much about him, and the only other thing we know of this character is that he sails on a black ship and that other ships that approach him get sunk by whirlpools. It would actually make a lot of sense for this silhouetted figure in the final page of chapter 1121 to be the man marked by flames. This is because the page seemingly shows the other major characters who will play a significant role in the endgame of One Piece. These include the 4 emperors, the king of the world, the fleet admiral of the marines, the head of the revolutionary army, as well as some of their most important subordinates. At this point in the story, there genuinely doesn't appear to be any other mysterious character who would fit this lineup other than the man marked by flames. This is even more so because the panel is accompanied by Vegapunk's broadcast declaring that whoever claims the One Piece will decide the fate of the world. As the character who has the last road poneglyph you need to reach the final island, the man marked by flames is naturally one of the big players in this race. However, what if the man marked by flames was actually not a pirate, but someone working for the world government? This is actually something brought up in the story, where Shiryu of the Rain speculates that the government could be holding the last road poneglyph to prevent anyone from going to the final island. One might question why the government would put the 4th road poneglyph on a ship, instead of for example hiding the poneglyph underground or even sending it to outer space if they don't want pirates to reach Laugh Tale. The reason for this could be that the government themselves want to find the One Piece. The world government is already putting a lot of effort into finding Joy Boy's devil fruit, meaning that they could be even more interested in getting their hands on the great treasure Joy Boy left behind. They only have one problem though, which is that 3 of the other 4 road poneglyphs were all located in countries hostile to the world government. The government could have realized this, and then created a trap by giving one of their own men the forged stone. This could lead to other pirate crews who are trying to reach Laugh Tale coming after the man marked by flames. If he managed to defeat these attackers, he could then seize whatever poneglyphs they were holding, putting the government closer to claiming the One Piece. A few hints in the story actually hint that this man could be the same man who met the Gorosei back during the the reverie. The first hint is that the man apparently came to meet the Gorosei from far away, which would fit the idea of him usually sailing the world's seas on the Black Ship. The elders also clearly respect this man, which would be fitting if he was one of their most important subordinates entrusted with finding the One Piece. A thing I brought up in my previous video is that the Celestial Dragons hate other Celestial Dragons who live below the red line. If Shanks' twin were the man marked by flames, one might question if this would also make the Celestial Dragons see him as a traitor, since he apparently sails the seas of the lower world. To clarify, the Celestial Dragons don't so much hate other Celestial Dragons who go below the red line, but instead those who live among regular humans. We've seen that the Celestial Dragons themselves regularly travel in the lower world without being called traitors. Therefore, Shanks' twin would likely retain his status as a Celestial Dragon if he was simply on his ship guarding the road poneglyph. The topic of this video is admittedly a lot to take in. Not only would Shanks have a twin brother, but this character would also be someone the author and the story have been building up for years, and he'd also be the man with the final road poneglyph that you need to reach Laugh Tale. Let's however assume that all of this is actually true. If Shanks' brother is indeed this man, it would also mean that he's right now the #1 target of all the characters who are currently in the race for the One Piece, which includes Shanks himself. This is where we finally return to the main topic of this video, which is that Shanks and his brother are the characters Oda talked about in his Jump Festa 2024 interview, and that the two of them are going to fight later this year. I think this actually could make a lot of sense. For one, Shanks fighting his twin could explain why Oda decided to be vague and not name either of the characters in the interview. The fight would also certainly be big enough to warrant a mention as one of the biggest things to happen this year in the manga. Shanks is currently one of the frontrunners in the race for the One Piece. He's now in possession of multiple road poneglyph rubbings after having beaten the Kid Pirates. Before this, Shanks was only stopping by in Elbaf and was originally heading somewhere else. As Shanks has now declared his intention to finally go claim the One Piece, it could be that where Shanks is heading is actually straight to the man marked by flames to get the last road poneglyph. While Shanks is one of the strongest characters in the entire story, it is genuinely possible that his brother would be someone on the same level as Shanks, and potentially someone even stronger. By the way, it's getting a bit awkward saying Shanks' twin or Shanks' brother in every other sentence, so for the rest of the video, I'll be referring to this hypothetical character as Franks. A big hint of Franks' possible strength is the thing speculated earlier in this video, which is that he might have been someone who managed to scar Whitebeard. This would be quite an incredible feat for any character considering Whitebeard's own strength. When Whitebeard got this scar he speaks of, he might have also still been much younger and healthier, perhaps even close to the strength he had when he was fighting equally with Roger. It could actually make a lot of sense for Shanks' twin to be one of the most powerful characters in the story. According to Buggy, Shanks even as a youth was someone brimming with talent. Shanks could also be considered to be one of the strongest Conqueror's Haki users in the story, which is an ability that based on characters like Luffy and Yamato, you might have a strong aptitude for based on your genes. If Franks is Shanks' identical twin, he could have the exact same natural talent that Shanks does. Not only this, but Franks could still have both of his arms. This is actually something very important. When Shanks rescued Luffy from the Lord of the Coast in chapter 1, he might not have just lost an arm, but his sword arm. Every time we've seen images of Shanks in the past, he's holding his sword in his left hand. The notion that Shanks lost his dominant arm is echoed by Mihawk, who was a former rival of Shanks' in swordplay, and who thinks that Shanks is now a has-been with one arm. While Shanks is clearly still extremely powerful in the current story, everything points to this being despite his maiming, and that Shanks would have been even more powerful if he had kept his left arm. In other words, Franks could be this hypothetical perfect version of Shanks that would have been if Shanks had kept both of his arms. Would this then confirm that Franks would be a character even stronger than Shanks? Not necessarily. A frequent theme in the growth of One Piece characters is that experience trumps everything. While the story is full of naturally gifted fighters, said talent is only as good as the experiences that make it grow. Luffy himself used to be much weaker than his brothers, but has since become far stronger than either Ace or Sabo, mostly due to just how much he's been through. Even though Franks could on paper sound like a better version of Shanks, while he's been lurking in the shadows, Shanks has traveled all over the world and fought countless battles. Through these experiences, Shanks with just one arm could still be even stronger than his twin brother with both arms. Regardless of which character would be stronger, this fight could still be very interesting for the story. The two characters would probably have very different fighting styles. Shanks was an infant when he left the Celestial Dragons, and has essentially lived all of his life as a pirate. This can also be seen in the way Shanks fights, where he was probably trained by Goldie Roger himself, as we see Shanks using the very same moves that Roger did. It goes without saying that this is probably a very different style than what the Celestial Dragons use. It's also possible that Franks could be a Devil Fruit user. If If he is the man marked by flames, it could be that his foot would allow him to create the whirlpools that are said to sink the vessels that try to approach the black ship. Whether this would be some kind of a storm-related foot or potentially even a Waterologia fruit is not something I'll speculate on though. Granted, it would be pretty funny for a Waterologia devil fruit user to be finally revealed in the story, only to be defeated by Shanks, who wouldn't have to worry about the water weakness of devil fruit users if he himself hasn't eaten one. I'd personally assume that Shanks would win this fight if it were to happen, as Shanks is seemingly still being set up to face off with characters like Luffy and Blackbeard later in the story. I for one really like the idea of Shanks being an active player like this during the final saga, where he'd be going from one place to another and fighting all sorts of different characters while trying to claim the One Piece. If Shanks is an actual character in the story, I also do not think that a loss to Shanks would mean that he's somehow out of the story. For example, Aokichi is another character who suffered a massive loss in the story during the time skip, yet he's right now arguably more relevant and intimidating than he's ever been, and is set up to be one of the most important characters in the final saga. Shanks beating the man marked by flames could mean that he'd have all 4 road poneglyphs that you need to reach Laugh Tale, yet he would still be missing one thing, which would be the ability to read the ancient language. If you're interested, I have a whole other video on my channel discussing how this could be the thing that would finally lead to Shanks meeting Luffy, and why their fight could be the last thing Luffy has to do before going to the final island. Anyway, thanks for watching this video to the end.